Hello everyone, and welcome to this new series where I am going to be painting the signs of the Zodiac. I decided to start with Pisces because, well, it's the Pisces time of year. But speaking of Pisces, I didn't want to be like everybody else and do two fish swimming in a yin-yang kind of formation, so I decided that I was going to paint mermaids, which unfortunately are very difficult to find any reference photos of for some reason. They're elusive. And, well, I had to go with the next best thing, which was finding photos of women underwater. Lots of them. Lots of photos of women underwater. I kind of pinpointed one specific photo that I wanted to use, and so I put it into my photo editor and I made a mirror image of it because I wanted to use the symbol of Pisces and not just fish swimming in a circle. Now it was time to get to sketching, and you'll notice I didn't use the typical seashell bra top. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go with more floaty fabric, kind of like a betta fish, and that's kind of what I ended up going with. I also didn't like the elbows in the first reference photo, so I ended up using this reference photo in order to get straighter arms. Because I wasn't really sure about a color scheme that I wanted to go with this painting to begin with, I decided to create an underpainting in oils, and so I toned the canvas first with a bit of burnt umber and thinner and then wiped the excess off. And then I put my sketch onto the canvas, and I painted one mermaid first so that I could use it as a guide for the other side. This isn't supposed to be exact mirror images. This isn't Gemini, this is Pisces, but I wanted them to be relatively symmetrical in order to create the symbol of Pisces shape. So I went in with a bit of burnt umber, my thinner, and some titanium white in order to create a value scale on the painting so I would have a guide for when I went on to using color. One of the main objectives that I have with this series is that I don't want every single painting to scream Zodiac. I want them to be beautiful paintings that stand alone by themselves without having the concrete symbolism that's associated with the sign, which is why I went with the two mermaids instead of the two fish. It's extremely difficult to come up with your own ideas, especially when you almost have it ingrained in your brain that, okay, this is the symbolism for Pisces, and this is what you do when you paint a Pisces painting. You have two fish, and that's what you do. But then there's a little voice that says, but I don't want to paint fish. And so you then say, well, what resonates with you, Lydia? Okay, well, I think mermaids resonate with me, so that's what I'm going to do. If I chose not to listen to that little voice, it would just get louder and more obnoxious as the day went on, so I just tend to listen to it. For this piece, I decided to go with a limited palette consisting of titanium white, cadmium yellow light, quinacridone red, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber. So why did I decide to use a limited palette for this painting? Well, I have several reasons. Well, mainly three. I think it's three. The first one is simplicity. I can get super overwhelmed if I have too many colors on my palette, and since I didn't have any specific color scheme for this painting, simplicity by narrowing it down to fewer tubes of paint is going to make it a lot easier for me to make decisions. I also wanted to focus on color harmony because, like I said, no color scheme established for this painting. I wasn't using any specific reference photo in order to get my color scheme, so having fewer colors like the primary trio of red, yellow, and blue plus white, the painting is naturally going to feel more unified because every mix comes from the same root mixes. You're not going to have any clashes that happen when you grab random tubes of paint. I also don't like to have too many colors on my palette to begin with because sometimes I end up wasting paint because I don't touch a color that I've squeezed out. So if I were going to add any more colors to my palette, then it would be a decision that comes later and not earlier. So those were two reasons, simplicity and color harmony. Okay, so here's the third. This keeps me up on my color theory and my skills for mixing different colors right where I want them to be. Sometimes with all of the variety of paint out there, you become a paint collector, or I have become a paint collector, and I'm like, ooh, look at this color. Ooh, look at that color. I want that. I'm going to buy it. But going back to basics actually helps me to maintain my color mixing ability by just using color theory, by mixing my primary colors together in order to create secondary colors, and then using the complements of the color that I mix in order to mute it down. So if I make something that's a little too vibrant purple and I want to mute it down, I know that I can use the complement of yellow in order to do so. So I've told you the reason for using 3 primary colors, but I haven't mentioned the burnt umber and why that is on the palette. Okay, so I don't have black on my palette, but in certain areas I need to have a really dark color, and that's where I can make something very similar to black by mixing burnt umber with ultramarine blue. Well, why wouldn't you just use a black? Well, there are certain areas of the painting where I'm going to have another color like a magenta or a purpley color that is going to mix in with the darkest color, and black will just really dull that color down. So if I have the burnt umber mixed with a little bit of ultramarine blue, maybe add a touch of the quinacridone red, it will blend more nicely with a vibrant color that might be stacked on top of it, unlike black, which would dull it down tremendously. So I think we've covered the reasons for why I'm using a limited palette in this painting. Now let's talk a little bit about the background and why I decided to go about that first. So doing the background, I wanted to have something that was dreamy and sort of nebulous because this has kind of a celestial vibe, even though it's 2 mermaids, which we would normally find underwater, but they are representing that astrological sign of Pisces, so it has kind of a cosmic vibe to it. There are a couple of reasons why I painted a lot of the background first. For one thing, I like to work from back to front in a lot of ways because working on the foreground is kind of like going in layers where it's like, okay, so I got the background down and now I can work on the foreground. The other reason why I wanted to do the background first was because it would help me determine the colors that I would ultimately use in the mermaids themselves. So I wanted to have some of the colors in their surroundings integrated into them or their clothing in this kind of fabric that is floating there. I wanted it to look kind of translucent, and so bringing a lot of those colors from their surroundings into the fabric was really important, but I wanted them to also stand out from the background and be sort of separate from it. And I didn't use any greens or blue greens in their surroundings at all. So what I ended up doing was bringing more of those colors into the body of the mermaid and also into their tail. I had planned on using some of those more aqua colors in the tails, so having the background not contain a lot of those colors gave the background more of a cosmic vibe, a nebulous vibe, and a dreamy quality about it, with a lot of these really soft pastels and these orangey colors. I also wanted to have the center of the painting be light. I wanted it to have a more yellowish feel to it, so having a lot of these purples in the painting as well was going to complement what I was going to do in the center of the painting. My whole plan for this painting was really to have a glowing central vibe to it, but also to still create like they were in front of a star in a way. And I think that was the vision that I had in my head. It was just putting my vision down onto canvas, which was a little bit challenging. The other thing that I found to be a little bit challenging was painting the fishtails, and at the same time, it was actually super easy. So I wasn't really sure how I was going to go about it. I don't paint fish very often, and I didn't want to sit there trying to paint scales on a fishtail. So I ended up just going with a very painterly expressive way of creating these designs on the fishtails, just using brushstrokes and layering different colors on top of each other in order to create a sort of iridescent flare to them, so that they were capturing light or sparkling a little bit. And that seemed to work really well. One thing I do want to say is that I did paint one mermaid first. And once again, just like in the underpainting, it was because I would need to use that mermaid as a guide for the second mermaid, which, by the way, made painting the second mermaid so much easier in both cases. There were a couple of things that I did have to adjust throughout the painting process. There were a few things like when I did the faces of the mermaid, I had in the sketch put the ears too far back. So I actually ended up having to fix that with paint. And that was really kind of annoying. But you know what? It happens. And sometimes you don't notice these things until you start actually painting with color, because everything is more on a value scale at the beginning when you do the underpainting. And so some adjustments definitely need to be made. Like, for instance, this tail looks a little bit lumpy in the front, so I ended up having to fix that later. But, you know, those are some of the things that you do run into when you have put a sketch on, you've done an underpainting, and you don't notice all of these things until you're actually in the midst of the primary painting process. So yeah, this was quite a painting. It was quite an undertaking, and I gotta say that it was one of the more enjoyable paintings that I've done in the past year or so. The last couple of paintings that I've done, I've really had a lot of fun with. I'm really enjoying this sort of cosmic vibe to a lot of my paintings of late, and I would like to continue, obviously, with this series of the zodiac signs and my take on them and how I want to create them, and just using a lot of my creativity in order to come up with the ideas, and also using some of the symbolism, but like I said before, not having every single painting scream zodiac. I do want to have them be beautiful paintings that anybody could put on their wall and not necessarily have it represent their own zodiac sign. So that is the ultimate goal, and I think that this is the first in a series of 12, even though I'm starting with the 12th sign, which might sound kind of counterintuitive in a way, but you know, that's just kind of how I roll. It's how I do things, out of order. It's fine. It works. It works for me. Read magazines backwards too. So start with the 12th sign and then I'll go on to the first. Oh well. And there we have it. So this is the finished painting. I say finished, although there's like a little bit of refinement that I do need to do on the hands when this painting is completely dry. However, for the most part, this painting is done. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think about my take on the zodiac sign Pisces. If you are a Pisces, let me know if you like the painting. And yeah, I do love you guys, and I will see you in the next painting. I'm going to be working on Aries. So see you next time. Bye for now.